Hi, welcome to this English grammar lesson on sentence fragments and how to complete them. I'm your teacher, Victoria Wordsmith. Complete sentences contain at least one independent clause, communicate in a complete idea, start with a capital letter, and end with a full stop, exclamation mark, or a question mark. Simple sentences contain one independent clause. An independent clause contains a subject noun and a predicate. A subject noun is the person or thing that does the action that the verb describes. A predicate is a word or group of words that describe the action or the state of being of the subject. For example, I walked to the library. I is the subject noun. Walked to the library is the predicate. An independent clause contains a complete idea. The above example can stand on its own, without another clause to contribute to the meaning. Compound sentences contain two independent clauses with a conjunction linking them. For example, I walked to the library and Clara ran to meet me. I walked to the library is an independent clause. Clara ran to meet me is an independent clause. And is the conjunction linking them. Complex sentences contain at least one independent clause and a secondary dependent clause or subordinate clause. A dependent clause relies on the independent clause for some of its meaning and to make sense. For example, I walked to the library and Clara ran to meet me, throwing her arms around my shoulders. I walked to the library is an independent clause. Clara ran to meet me is an independent clause. Throwing her arms around my shoulders is a dependent clause. In formal writing, all sentences must begin with a capital letter. Informal writing often contains sentences without capital letters, which can be a deliberate stylistic choice for poetic effect, speedy typing, or a typo. This was very common in the digital age before smartphones. Now we have predictive text to automatically turn our first letters into capitals. In order to complete a sentence and separate it from the next sentence, the right punctuation needs to appear at the end. Either a full stop or period, an exclamation mark, or a question mark must be used. An ellipsis is sometimes used in informal writing to end sentences and express uncertainty or derision, but this is inappropriate in formal writing. In that case, it indicates that a piece of text continues beyond what is quoted. Therefore, it is generally used to end sentence fragments. For example, I walked to the library and Clara ran to meet me, throwing her arms around my shoulders. Hi, Victoria. When did I last see you? It must have been when... She trailed off. The first and last sentences end in full stops. The second sentence ends in an exclamation mark. The third sentence ends in a question mark. The fourth is a sentence fragment and ends in an ellipsis. Wait, isn't the second sentence incomplete? No, interjections and salutations are exceptions to the sentence completion rules. You can greet someone or express sudden feeling with one word. You can also answer questions with simply yes or no. Let's work through some types of sentence fragment. Missing a subject noun. Some sentence fragments are relatively easy to identify because they're missing an essential element. For example, fighting in the hallway in their pajamas. There is no subject noun, therefore no indication of who is doing the verb fighting. We could complete it in at least two different ways. We could add a subject noun phrase and turn it into a complete independent clause. The siblings were fighting in the hallway in their pajamas. We could turn it into a dependent clause by adding another independent clause that would complete the meaning. Fighting in the hallway in their pajamas, the siblings woke their parents. Missing a verb. Here's another example of a sentence fragment. Minnie and her chew toy in the garden. The fragment sets a scene, but there is no verb, therefore no participle. We don't need to add much to complete it. Minnie and her chew toy were in the garden. Or, Minnie chewed her toy in the garden. Sometimes turning a fragment into a sentence involves making it shorter. Missing an auxiliary verb. Does adding a verb always complete the predicate and the sentence? Consider the following. The birds bathing in the puddle. Birds is a subject noun and bathing is a verb, but this is still a sentence fragment. Bathing is a dangling present participle, and we need a complete participle to form a sentence. To do this, we need to add an auxiliary verb, such as were, are, or had been. The birds had been bathing in the puddle. Or, the birds bathing in the puddle were getting soggy. Here, the sentence fragment has been turned into a noun phrase. Containing a noun and a predicate. What about this sentence? It contains all the necessary elements, doesn't it? What's wrong? While the apples decomposed in the compost. The apples decomposed in the compost is actually a complete sentence. While is a subordinating conjunction, therefore turning the sentence into a dependent clause or subordinate clause. The idea expressed in the sentence is no longer complete and needs an independent clause to make sense. Flies buzzed around while the apples decomposed in the compost. Infinitive phrases. Here is another example that appears to follow all the rules. Clara to invite all of her friends to her birthday party. This type of configuration is common in headings, especially in newspapers, but it is not a complete sentence. Like before, we could add an auxiliary verb. Clara is to invite all of her friends to her birthday party. Alternatively, we could turn it into a dependent clause. Clara created a Facebook event to invite all of her friends to her birthday party. Afterthoughts. Another common type of fragment begins with a word such as especially, for example, for instance, like, such as, including, excluding, or except. For example, Minnie barks at many disturbances in the night. For example, cats fighting, owls hooting, crickets chirping, rubbish bin wheels rumbling, neighbouring TVs blaring, and babies crying. The second sentence is a fragment. The full stop before it should be replaced with a comma. We could also add a subject noun and a verb to make two complete sentences. Minnie barks at many disturbances in the night. For example, she hears cats fighting, owls hooting, crickets chirping, rubbish bin wheels rumbling, neighbouring TVs blaring, and babies crying. The longer the better? I've already demonstrated that completing a sentence doesn't necessarily involve elongating it. It follows then that a long sentence can be a fragment. For example, when we walked into the park, upon seeing a large Malamute dog, little Minnie's excitement, wonder, and outrage, so intense, her fur bristling, bark slicing through the quiet evening, while I locked her extender leash and pulled back, dragging her away from the giant, nonplussed dog. This fragment contains many nouns, verbs, and ideas, and it certainly paints a picture of an action-packed scene. Upon inspection, however, it is made up entirely of dependent clauses. We could turn one of them into an independent clause. When we walked into the park, upon seeing a large Malamute dog, little Minnie's excitement, wonder and outrage was so intense, her fur bristling, bark slicing through the quiet evening, while I locked her extender leash and pulled back, dragging her away from the giant nonplussed dog. Alternatively, we could turn many of them into independent clauses, thereby breaking the long sentence up into multiple sentences. We walked into the park. We saw a large Malamute dog. Little Minnie's excitement, wonder, and outrage was so intense. Her fur bristled, her bark sliced through the quiet evening. I locked her extender leash and pulled back. I dragged her away from the giant nonplussed dog. 7 complete sentences out of 1 fragment? In practice, the text would flow smoother with a happy medium. We walked into the park. Upon seeing a large Malamute dog, little Minnie's excitement, wonder, and outrage was so intense, her fur bristling, bark slicing through the quiet evening. I locked her extender leash and pulled back, dragging her away from the giant, nonplussed dog. Thanks to the resources in my bibliography for helping me write this lesson for you guys. I'll link to them in the description below. Thanks also to the following for making the creation of me and also this video possible. I will also link to these in the description below. Well, there you go. Has your grammar checker identified a sentence fragment that you're not sure what to do with? Comment down below and I'll have a look at it. And you can also subscribe to me on here or social media for more grammar tips. And please give me a like if you found this video useful. Thanks for watching. Bye!